quickly. Again, sorry for squeezing you for time, and sorry to our panelists too for what will be a pretty rapid-fire panel presentation. I'll be very succinct in my statement here. We have Lorna Crowshoe, Tanya Harnett, Quyen Hoang, and Ronald here in front of us. Candice has stepped down. Thank you very much. We didn't want that to happen, but in consideration of time, thank you, Candice, and we hope to continue the discussion with you. This panel explores the specific histories and problems of monuments from the past, present, and future, and anticipated future, I should say. The panelists will also be examining examples of public art as they relate to colonial intentions and Indigenous resistance in Calgary, the surrounding area, and beyond. Public performance, works of architecture, highways and pipelines, as we know from Jimmy Durham's critique on Friday, and more may all be considered. I presume you've checked the bios for all of our panelists, so maybe I won't make those sort of introductions. I can say quickly, though, for those that haven't had a look, Lorna Crowshoe, who is second from my left, is the Aboriginal Issue Strategist for the City of Calgary. That's a very brief introduction to what you've done, and is presenting on the Mokinstis story, the story of the Blackfoot people and the land prior to the birth of the City of Calgary, and also talking about making Treaty 7, a very important, what some might consider a mobile monument or memorial. We'll see. Tanya Harnett is on my far left, is an artist and teaches in the Native Studies Department at the University of Lethbridge, and will be discussing her recent production of the Lebret residential petroglyphs photographs, which is a series, and I think a rumination really on how the work might be received in the future. Very important. Ron Hawker, you already know, or is your last name Thomas? I can't remember. I see. Is the Associate Head of the Department of Liberal Studies at ACAD, and has done extensive research into the legacies of Aboriginal culture, especially in British Columbia, I would say, but of course there's overlap with the United Arab Emirates. He'll be talking about 3 waves of monuments in Victoria, BC, and how each asserts a different set of meanings about land, territoriality, and culture within the shadow of course, colonialism. Quyen Hoang is a curator and writer, sorry, I should identify you, third from my left, with an extensive history of working with collections, especially at the Glenbow, where you worked for 10 years and did amazing work both as a curator and a collections manager, and is now the program coordinator for the Public Art Department of the City of Calgary. She'll be talking to us about how a city like Calgary, a relatively new city, so to speak, with problems with its colonial past, grapples with indigeneity by giving us a quick overview of the history of the public art program in Calgary and how the city's public art program was formed, and look very briefly at some significant monuments here and the problematics associated with them. So if we could start with you, Lorna, and take us into the past and right now into the future, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much. It was really important to have Margaret Waterchief welcome everybody to the traditional Blackfoot territory yesterday morning. We work really closely. We really value our elders in the Blackfoot community. Their presence is really important to our culture, our traditions, and to sustain our traditions. And so today I'm presenting the Mokinstis story, but I wanted to talk just a little bit. I wanted to do a bit of a preamble to the story and just state the important work of our elders. Elders are the storytellers and keepers of our traditional knowledge. When elders tell a story, they qualify where the story came from and verbally cite who told the story, similar to that of academia. The difference is, amongst our First Nations people, our knowledge is oral. Elders are like our libraries, and they collectively share and transfer knowledge so that our culture and traditions remain intact, and they are always diligent about how our stories are passed on to the next generations. Several elders were interviewed over time for this particular story. Thus, this story has the credentials of our elders. I also worked with Dr. Eldon Yellowhorn. He's a Piikani Nation from my home community, and a professor of archaeology at Simon Fraser University. So our traditions, culture, spirituality, and our language sustain us as Blackfoot members and members in our traditional territory. If we didn't practice these fundamental aspects of our way of life, we would lose the essence of being a Blackfoot person. Mohkinstsis is what the Blackfoot people call the city of Calgary because of the Elbow River. This is the Bow River, in fact. The Bow River is a landmark place used by my ancestors when they camped in this particular location. Mohkinstsis is the location of where the Elbow and Bow Rivers meet and where the Blackfoot nations gathered several times a year for extended periods of time and for various purposes. The rivers provided all the necessities for tribes to gather, but more importantly, it is a central location and meeting place where clan or band leaders convened their people in order to make decisions about annual movements throughout the territory and to ensure a collective well-being of our people was intact. The Beaver Bundle people are the traditional and spiritual leaders of this location and were always known to camp by water. Similarly, the Thunder Medicine Pipe people were always known to camp near the mountains. Validation of the territory comes from our spiritual bundles. Our spiritual bundles represent a political piece of traditional legislation. Everyone in the Blackfoot community came to know and respect the laws through gathering places like Mohkinstsis. The Blackfoot people's legislative system was in place long before the arrival of newcomers and certainly was practiced and still practiced today. Newcomers sought shelter from the Blackfoot nations and settled where camps already existed. By the 1870s, Blackfoot territory was encroached by newcomers. In 1875, the Northwest Mounted Police built Fort Calgary, which was named by Colonel James MacLeod after his home at Calgary Bay on Scotland's Isle of Mull. The Northwest Mounted Police set up forts in southern Alberta, mainly to circumvent the whiskey trade that was decimating our Blackfoot people. But our elders' account is a little bit different. These were places where our Blackfoot people actually purchased liquor. By the way, the story of Colonel MacLeod and Calgary Bay is on a mural at City Hall. We need our local people to add to that story. The elders interviewed for this story all had the same message, that Mohkinstsis is only one of many sites or places within the whole entire territory. Mohkinstsis is part of a Blackfoot geographic system or mental mind map of our Blackfoot worldview. Because our ancestors didn't have a written language, they used images to regulate the geography in Blackfoot territory. The world was a human body in their minds. In the same way people talk about Mother Earth, our ancestors understood the world in these terms. The Blackfoot people were trying to imagine their world, so they used the metaphor of a body to explain it. If you look at the map of Blackfoot territory, you will see the Blackfoot worldview. Nose Hill, here in Calgary, is only one of several place names that make reference to this metaphor. These autonomy or atomy references are all over southern Alberta and northern Montana. You will see place names like Hand Hills, Knee Hills, Thigh Hills, east of Calgary, and the Belly Buttes or Mookwan Butte on the Blood Reserve, and Heart Butte on the Blackfoot Reservation. Within this context, Mohkinstsis, or Calgary, literally means elbow in our geographic system. Other markers in our Blackfoot territory are related to the stories of our creation, or our Napi stories, and I think the term trickster stories was used this morning. These markers include Sweetgrass Hills near the Coots border, Chief Mountain near Waterton National Park, Victoria Mountain and the Crow's Nest Pass, Riding on Stone Park, Cypress Hills, the Porcupine Hills, which is just north of my home reserve at Piikani Nation. All of these places and sites are our monuments. They represent our historical and spiritual connections to the land and to the environment. One of the elders state that the Creator put the Blackfoot people specifically in this territory, thus we have a duty and responsibility for the stewardship of the land. I'm sure there are many other tribes and other territories who have similar beliefs. We are still practitioners on the land, and these sites are our sacred sites. In 1877, the year, in 1877, the year of the signing of Treaty 7, number 7, the elders mentioned that the Blackfoot people's concept of treaty was peacemaking or forging new relationships. But it was the beginning of reserve life for all our tribes in the Treaty 7 area. The people of Tsuut'ina Nation came into the Blackfoot territory about 500 years ago and were traditionally adopted by the Blackfoot people. They are Athabascan speaking people and belong to the Dene and that grouping. The Lakota, Nakota tribes of Stoney Nations came into this territory about 200 years ago, and they originate from South Dakota, from the Lakota people. The Mohkinstsis story and the history of the Blackfoot people has been consistently absent from Calgary's local history. We have Blackfoot sites in Calgary that are at least 12,000 years old. I think the only time we really participate as members of the Calgary community is the 10 days of Calgary Stampede, when we come out, and of course Indian Village is up and running, and that's probably the only time we really honor the people of Treaty 7 and the Blackfoot people. Calgary was incorporated in 1895, and most Calgarians think that this is when Calgary's history started. And once in a while we see a glimpse of our history, but that's not enough. We have a very rich history here in Mohkinstsis, and we want to reclaim our rightful place in our traditional territory by sharing our stories so that it becomes every Calgarian's history too. I want to just briefly take you to another project that I'm working on. I wonder if we can call up the making of Treaty 7. So the Making Treaty 7 is actually a theater production, and the premiere of the production was presented in September of this year at the original timing of the signing of Treaty 7, and it's going to be an annual production here in Calgary. We are working towards taking the production national, especially as Canadians gear up to celebrate the sesquicentennial year in 2017. And it's a very important production. I guess the whole philosophy behind making Treaty 7 is we are all treaty people. Sometimes we think that because we are the members I guess, in which the treaty was made. We forget that there is the other half. And I think in part, your ancestors too signed the treaty, and that makes us all treaty people. So if you have an opportunity, please go on the website and download this. The theater production is about 3 hours long, and it talks about pre-treaty, post-treaty, and the impact that the treaty has had on our Aboriginal or our First Nations people here in Treaty 7. Thank you very much.
Maybe while we're just getting that started up, I'll keep moving because I know we're pressed for time. I want to say thank you to the Blackfoot people for allowing us to be on this territory. I have some students here and I see them waving in the background, so it's very nice to be in this territory, and thank you. And being able to work with them is a privilege, and I've learned so much. For the show, for the residential petroglyph show, I need to say thank you to the Alberta Foundation for the Arts and the Art Gallery at Calgary, or Art Gallery of Grand Prairie, Todd Shaber, who is a curator, and Sherry Farrell, who wrote for the catalog that's just about to come out. I want to thank my student Jolie, who came out for the first the shooting, so it was a test shoot, and then my mother, who came out with me afterwards. Thank you to the organizers for making sure that artists were included on the panels, because I think getting artist voice out there is really important as well. Genocide was brought up, and I was wondering if that was actually going to come up, and I was kind of scared about bringing up the term genocide because nobody likes to use that word. And but specifically, I'm going to be looking at the forcibly transferring children, and more specifically, the mental harm that's continuing right now. We're in a fog right now. And the entire time that Aboriginal people have been working or here and under government policy, it's been this cloud. We don't know what's happening. We didn't know what's happening in our families. So it's been kind of a storm. I'm Treaty 4 person. I'm from Carry the Kettle. And my family, I have 3 generations that went to residential schools. And so, does this have a pointer? No. Okay. So actually, just Lebret is where we're looking at, and it's just beside Regina down there. And so we're looking at Lebret Indian School. And so it's just off if anyone's been on the Trans-Canada, it's just right beside Indian Head is my reserve in the red. Up by the purple is where the Lebret School was, and the Fort Qu'Appelle where the treaty was signed. That is a picture of my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my grandmother, my uncle, my grandmother, and her husband, my grandfather. My great-grandfather, Kennedy, he wrote quite a bit, and I am constantly going back to his stories, more so than I thought I would. He lived from 1876 to 1976, and so I was alive and at the funeral. So I would have been 6 years old. So the stories that he tells of when the buffalo were being slaughtered on the plains, they seem right alive to me today. It doesn't seem that distant. And as people were saying, they think it's a distant history. It's not. It's very close. So just a little. I'll let you guys read that because I don't like reading things off screens. Just a little bit about my grandfather. Okay. Too fast. I had a nod from somebody. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of speed reading here. Okay? For a nod. Yeah. Okay. So that's he really brought up in Regina, right? Well, there's a really strong Victorian strength. We have the Queen City, and it's also a place where my people were. So we actually had 28,000 people, and after the smallpox came, we had 2,600. We lost 91% of our people in the smallpox. So that's my great-grandfather's book, and then the bentwood box that's going along with the TRC. I have to say that I've been absolutely, totally angry about what's been happening with the TRC. And I don't think people understand what exactly the extent of what's happening in this just cruel way of dealing with people who went to residential schools. And I think that it's time to change the semantics. It's time to change the lexicon, because I don't see the term survivor as working. It's not survivors. These were victims. Now, if the bentwood box is a symbol of a monument, that it's a really complicated thing in itself. That object is loaded with things. During the first TRC at Vancouver, I did attend, and it was such a kerfuffle. There was so much stuff happening, and it was a mess. You had angry people at mics. You had victims in the corner. You didn't have the support. They were supposed to, Justice Minister Sinclair was supposed to open the box, and earlier in the day said we could, and when everything went chaotically at the end of the day, the box wasn't open, and I went up and I said, I want that box open. And he went and got two other people, and they lifted the lid, and my grandfather's book was the first one to go in, and he has a chapter on his experience in going to residential school. So the first industrial residential school on site was 1884 to 1904, and then it was burnt down. I don't know how that happened, but you can see. But you can see, obviously, you see families in front of the gate. It's not just teepee. Those are teepees. Those are families, and they're wondering where their kids are and what's going to happen, and you can see right from the beginning. I see that in the first instance they took the children, and then after that they took parents, and so you had dysfunctional families from then on going down. This is the second building, and it was up 1905 to 1932, and it got burnt down. and then the third building, 1939 to 1969, and it closed in 1969. Its operation as a residential school, and then it was picked up by White Calf Collegiate for post-secondary kind of training, but it closed too, and then was torn down. The day it was torn down, my mother was on the site as they were watching it get pulled by the what is that, a digger, crane? Thank you. It went down in the day, and there were lawn chairs, and everybody was out and watching this happen, and it was silent, absolutely silent. So nobody talked as this building came down. My mother went to Brandon residential school. She didn't go to Lebret. That partially that was because she was on the main line, the main CPR line, and so they just put her on a train and then sent her over there. She left at the age of 4, and they would bring people back and forth during Christmas and summers. And that's the school. Okay, now we're going to get into the point where I'm talking about what monument or lack of monument, or I guess it's just a question. I think I have more questions when I do my art than anything else, so it posits a question. Okay, so this is the road between my reserve and then going to Fort Capel or Lebret, and that's where we get our mail. That's where my mother picks up her mail, and people were driving by that all the time. It's a road that we use. And this gate that you see on the left-hand side beside the railway track is the only thing that you see remaining because the buildings are torn down. So this gate is the only thing that's there. My mother drives by it all the time and doesn't see it. It's just part of what's invisible now. And it occurs to me that that's a strange thing considering what it actually symbolizes. So we went through the gate. When I did the photo shoot, she came with me, and as she came down, she's going, well, this looks exactly like Brandon. She just had a flashback going, okay, I know this place. So that's the old picture. And that's my picture. There's not much change. Time is minute in what's happened. People think this is a long time ago. No. Okay, so this is the exhibition. On the actual gates themselves, there's one section that says Gateway to Hell, and you can't see up at the top. If you follow the bar, you can sort of see it up at the top. Can you see it from here? And on the other side, I wish I had a pointer. Then on the other side it says bullshit. The gates are still locked. The fence is torn down and you can still go through, but the gates are still locked. You can imagine what it would have been like for a child coming through the gates. Some people have said it was for dignitaries. Some people from my reserve girls said they went through. My papa said he didn't go through the gates. He was on a truck and was in like this big pickup truck, lolly or whatever, going into the back of the school. You can't see this here right now, but along this whole brick wall are carvings. This needs to be played. Can we play this? It's a quick one. I'm a very poor videographer. And on the end there is my grandfather's story. Okay. I'm just going to flip through these images. Sorry, it's so fast. This is a quote from Shelley Narrow, and I'm just going to leave it at her words. Okay?
Thank you very much, Tanya. Sorry to cut you off like that.
That's okay.
Really. Ronald?
So while we're setting this up, I'm going to tell you about one of my hometowns, Victoria. I lived in Victoria from the age of 12 to about 24. Yeah. Up until recently, my parents lived there, so I used to go back.
Use the mic because we're being recorded.
Sorry, I have to use the mic. I forget what I was saying now. Okay, so here, anyways, never mind. Well, not never mind. The whole way I've constructed this PowerPoint is as if it's a kind of time lapse, and the time lapse is going to demonstrate multiple monumental schemes that in many ways I see as conflicting with each other. And so in many ways the time lapse kind of mimics my own experience of living away from this town and going back and then seeing it change over time. So this is the inner harbor of Victoria. This is the original location of Fort Victoria, which was established in 1858. There used to be a small village right next to it of the Songhees people, or part of the Coast Salish language group who own this area. And then after that, they were moved across the harbor to this area here. And this was, for a time, the Songhees Reservation. You can look at different numbers for the population decline. One population estimate was that at the time of contact there were roughly 8,500 Songhees people, and that by 1859, actually by 1911 there were 500. So depending on who you're looking at, there's the same sort of population decline that we've been talking about before. It was for a long time a kind of trade hub. The Songhees village in particular was a kind of trade hub for people going up and down the coast. So this is just some background information. For the sake of time, I'm just going to flip through these really quickly. I've tried to embed quite a lot of knowledge in the PowerPoint itself. This is a view of the Songhees houses from Fort Victoria, and you can see some of the Songhees encampment sites just adjacent to the fort here. This is a view of the Songhees houses with Victoria in the background from 1890. One of the things that happens between 1892 and about 1913 is that British Columbia explodes with this sudden infusion of settlers, and there's a kind of cooperative deal worked out between the CPR and the government to reconfigure the inner harbor. This is an original view of the legislature buildings in Victoria, and it used to be an intertidal zone that you'd have to cross on the bridge. And what they did is they redesigned the whole area. And over here on, well, here's the Empress Hotel, which is iconic in itself and represented the fusion of two different styles, English and French, which was seen to be representing the national identity of Canada at the time. And then over here are the new legislature buildings that still dominate the inner harbor. And then over here is the old CPR steamship terminal, which was one of the reasons why the whole area was reconstituted and why there was a sudden infusion of a large outside population. And along with that, the kind of visual identity of the Inner Harbor was established at the time. And along goes with that are the monuments of the great imperial conquest, including Queen Victoria over here and Captain Cook over on the right. In 1905, there is a regional Vancouver Island rail system. Actually, from the 1870s, they were putting on quite a lot of pressure on the Songhees people. And in 1911, they were relocated away from their reserve into another one. Now, this is all occurring at some of the most important and intrusive moments of the activities of the Department of Indian Affairs. And one of the key aspects of this is the ban of the potlatch, and which is, it's a generic term that means a lot of different things, but at the heart of it is a kind of basis for, order and within Indigenous communities on the coast. Also around this time, they had the McBride Commission of 1912 to 1916, which actually reduced the allotment of reserve land at the time. This is really important, and it goes along with notions of how do monuments construct that kind of social order. And this is a photograph of a big house up in Fort Rupert. Over on the far left is a now very famous artist who died in 1960. His name is Mungo Martin. And the chief of the house has outlaid the entire kind of ceremony paraphernalia they have in anticipation of the McBride Commission arriving. And the point is that this is to foreground their laws and histories and how it relates to their territoriality. In 1922, actually in 1921, there was a very large potlatch held on the Central Coast, which led to the prosecution of 22 people who eventually ended up doing prison time for dancing in Ocala Prison Farm, which is just outside of Vancouver. The two villages actually worked out a kind of agreement with the provincial government, or with the federal government rather, in which they turn over their masks and dance paraphernalia to the National Museum in Ottawa so that they wouldn't have jail time. One of the potlatchers who was actually imprisoned, his name was Spruce Martin. And the moment that he got out of Ocala prison, he held a series of oolican oil potlatches as he went up the coast, which is a particular kind of ceremony to wipe away shame and to shame your competitor. And his brother Mungo, over here on the right, is often considered to be one of the greatest Kwakwaka'wakw carvers of all time. In the late 1940s, he began working for museums in and around Vancouver and Victoria, and he was part of the establishment of a totem pole carving program at the museum in Victoria. And in 1953, he opened up a place called Wawaditla, which is a carving shed, and it was the first public potlatch held since the 1922 one. Here is Mungo Martin and Henry Hunt and Richard Hunt, and they sort of radiate out these poles from around the museum, which again is located right next to the legislature and the hotel. And so what we get out of that are a series of Kwakwaka'wakw poles in the 50s and 60s. And by 1958, the province of British Columbia declared itself to be totem land. And they hired Ellen Neal, a female carver, actually a relative of Mungo Martin's, to carve these poles to hand out to people. Now the point is that the Kwakwaka'wakw are not Coast Salish, they're not Songhees, this is not their territory. And that their artistic intervention is important because it in many ways is a kind of response to the potlatch laws, or the anti-potlatch laws. What's happened recently since 1990 is the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations have commissioned a series of public monuments that I believe reclaim that space. And I'll just quickly go through this. So these are two important poles. The knowledge pole on the right is actually on the lawn of the legislature. the spirit of Lekwelman is actually located at a place called Songhees Point, where the original Songhees village was. And they have now an interpretive walk with a series of bronze castings called the Signs of Lekwungen, which actually foregrounds a history within the space itself. And they have also been involved with the Spirit Square and also the Unity Wall mural. I'm just going to quickly go through this and show them to you.
1 minute.
Yeah, I got 1 minute, so it's going to be really quick, guys. What I want to do is, anyway, here is Butch Dick, who did the Signs of Lekwungen, and you know, just to show you the kind of process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip through here and show you where these are located. And if you go through here, you can actually see how they are specific to the space and recall Songhees' memory about that place. And this is actually commissioned by the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. If you catch me another time, I'll send you the PowerPoint if you're interested, and you can actually see this. But you can see how it imposes itself over the overall city of Victoria. This is Spirit Square, which is actually at City Hall. So again, these are in very important places. And the last one that I want to show you, it's the entry point for the large cruisers that come through, the large cruise ships. And it is another project that Butch Dick is involved with. And it's called the Unity Wall. And what they've done is they've worked with both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal youth in order to create this mural and to have a blessing in the Salishan language. So when you arrive, this is the first thing you see.
And the last presenter is Quyen Hoang. Again, Quyen, very sorry about the compressed time, but we're going to finish right at 12.
I will
Thank you.
speed read. The first thing I wanted to say is how deeply grateful and humbled I am to be part of these discussions. I can't provide any revolutionary strategies, but I'm going to steal from Jimmy Durham and just say that if what I say doesn't sound useful to you, then just feel free to pretend that I'm expressing really cogent and useful ideas. This is more of a gesture to acknowledge my partial complicity and to make visible some things that are somewhat invisible, as Jen Budney referred to yesterday. And I'm not going to show slides. I had prepared slides, and I decided that these images are so ubiquitous and that I think it'd be more interesting if you just hear what I have to say, stare at me if you wish, project whatever you want, and know that I'm not Aboriginal, I'm not white. I was born in Vietnam, and my father arranged the escape for 1,000 people on 7 boats, and here I am today to talk to you. I am one voice, one interruption in these narratives as well. And you know, I invite you to explore the city for yourself and look at these objects for yourselves and have your own conversations with them, and in your own cities if you're not from Calgary as well. And not surprisingly, there is very little Aboriginal history presented in our public art collection, and so this land definitely needs to be exhumed and examined and claimed and interrupted in so many ways. As Edward Said has just suggested, all knowledge is political, that regardless of intention, we can't separate ourselves from the constructs created by the culture in which we participate. Like most cities, public art began here without shape or form. For the last century, public art has been commissioned, donated, and installed by private individuals, organizations, businesses, and through various city departments. Today, we have a municipal public art program, which enacts a % for art policy, and if you don't know what that means, it means that 1% of all capital projects over $1 million is eligible for public art. We also have a bonus density program that began in 1984, and that is for developers who want to increase density of downtown buildings, so public art or a donation to a public art fund is an option for them. So many works you see downtown, such as the Jean Plenza piece in front of the Bow Tower, is a result of this program. And of course, public art happens in other ways. Artists and arts organizations have created interventions and festivals that, we've seen in the city as well. So many ways that public art happens here. I will start with first slide. So imagine, if you will, the Boer War Memorial in the Central Memorial Park downtown. It is known as the earliest public art work, but that's from a very non-Aboriginal perspective, of course. It was commissioned in 1911 and erected in 1914. The Boer War Memorial by Louis Philippe Hébert commemorates Canadian soldiers in the Boer War, or the South African War. Many Canadians fought in that war, and 500 of which were mounted Rough Riders with headquarters in Calgary, so it has been a source of local pride. This is the quintessential public art piece. 18 feet high, cast in bronze. It is heroic in scale, on a granite plinth, depicting a hero on a horse, honoring the winners of history and emphasizing strong ties to the British Empire. How much time? Okay, I'm skipping. The next next slide is Brotherhood of Mankind, and it is a 6.5 meter tall grouping of aluminum cast figures. They were met with anger and protest when they were first installed in the 60s. They've since become well loved, and their silhouettes have become the logo for the Calgary Board of Education. Perhaps because of their arrangement, which was actually decided at the time of their install by Parks Department. They appear to be a symbol of inclusivity. They were actually props for the British Pavilion from Expo 67. Each figure represents Britain's gifts to the colonies, such as justice and law. Yeah. And there is very little not even just Aboriginal representation, but Blackfoot presence is very, very invisible here. So I just wanted to sort of talk about a couple pieces that maybe will cheer us up a little bit. I would like to look at works that are sort of anti-monuments, that present shifts in perspective and consider buried histories, voices, and lost memories. I would like to think of Rebecca Belmore's performance entitled Artifact 671B as an anti-monument for Calgary. Performed outside the Thunder Bay Art Gallery, however, in freezing temperatures, Belmore presented her body in a glass case as a museum artifact in protest of the Spirit Sings exhibition organized by the Glenbow Museum in 1988 as part of the Winter Olympics. The protest was originally against Shell Oil, who was a sponsor for the exhibition, who happened to be drilling on Lubicon land in northern Alberta. The exhibition was meant to be a celebration of Aboriginal artistry. It became an event that confronted the authority over cultural representation, highlighting unresolved histories between the museums and Aboriginal people, and failed to recognize the lived realities of the people that they were representing. This was a watershed moment for museums across the board and forced change. This symposium for me is like a similar protest to talk about how culture and place has been defined in similar colonial ways and in the public realm. Another piece that I wanted to mention is by Terence Hoole and Trevor Freeman that was first performed in Calgary, called Portage in 2005. Dressed in traditional Aboriginal garb and Métis garb, the two men portage across the city with 16-foot canoe above their heads, reminding us of another history before the city was built. And then I wanted to end with my last slide, but we will see this when we go to the airport, actually. It's a work by Joan Cardinal Schubert, commissioned by the Calgary International Airport, titled Drum Dancer, the Messenger. Unlike the Boer War Memorial, the work is more human in scale. This prairie pony is mounted on its four-direction terrazzo floor and points south in the direction of Writing on the Stone Park in southern Alberta, reminding us of a much earlier history of public art in the form of petroglyphs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for speed reading. Again, sorry to all of our panelists for such brief presentations, and sorry to cut off the dialogue. If anyone's coming to Saskatoon with us, and I hope you are, Trevor Bodie might still have room in his car. We'll carry on the discussion. I wanted to thank Dale Vandenberg and Alex Moon for their fantastic work. because it's not just the technology you see in front of you, it's the Skyping, it's the live streaming of all of this, which has been really successful. Alex McIntosh, Keisha Palmer, where are you? Done wonderful work. All of our students, Lori, Lee, Claire, all of our students have done wonderful work to support this, and we appreciate all of the support. Thank you for being here, and we'll meet again.